Greetings. Welcome back to the Cape Lead Revolution and yet another edition of Leaders with Leaders. Today I'm honored to have my wing commander, the commander of the 93rd Air Ground Operations Wing, Colonel Paul Birch. Sir, thank you for joining us today.
It's an honor. Thanks for making the drive over here to Randolph to visit me.
This is absolutely easy to do. One of the things I haven't done in the past is let the guests kind of explain who they are and tell us a little bit about yourself and get to know who you are, heaven forbid, as a human being and not just a colonel of the United States Air Force.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. So as you said, commander and still kind of in shock and awe, if you can believe, of being the 93rd AGAO, guy at least nominally at the top, honored to oversee this mission of the TACP Enterprise, the Army Weather Support Enterprise, and of course the one and only 820th Base Defense Group. And come from an aviation background, which has been kind of the trend of the AGAO commander over the past few years, but definitely getting fully immersed in this mission and completely enamored with this set of airmen. Real quick, just bio sketch. Born in a suburb of Chicago, parents moved to upstate Western New York, Buffalo area when I was really little. So went through that whole Buffalo Bills trauma was my formative years.
You bet. I'm a Browns fan, so I understand.
So you know how it is. Went to the Air Force Academy. Right out of the Air Force Academy, did a couple years in grad school at MIT. Went to nav school, became a backseater in the F-15E. Did an operational tour up in Alaska with a deployment to Korea right after 9/11. So that's kind of where my formative ops experience was. Had the opportunity to go to the Pentagon, be an intern there. And that turned, I was able to exploit that into a pilot slot. Moved up to be a front seater in the F-15E. And then I've lived kind of that standard CAS life since then. So deployment after deployment, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, you name it, doing the JOB. Some time in the SAF-IA, the International Affairs Enterprise, foreign military sales policy, work in front office Pentagon, a deployment as the operations group commander at Al Dhafra, which was really neat because that was at the time the most diverse operations group in the Air Force. We had F-22s and F-15Es, we had the E-3 AWACS, we had the ground-based radar controllers, we had the KC-10, we had the U-2, we had the RQ-4, we had it all going on there at Al Dhafra, back to finish up at the Pentagon, and then here I am.
Amazing. So that's an incredible career, and I'm always in awe of the people that get to be our wing commanders. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're going to be the creme de la creme of our officer corps to do that, but it's different than some of the enlisted experiences that we're given throughout our careers. So as far as the 93rd AGAO goes, and some of your experiences, I mean, you talk about being the OG, such a diverse mission there, but now you have people spread over multiple different states, multiple different time zones. Hardly any of your squadrons are in the same area as their group. I happen to be one of them, right. As far as that goes. So what do you try and do to build that culture of communication, and what do you try and focus on to make sure that all of your units are successful?
Thanks for bringing that up, Chachi. It's the tyranny of distance, is what I call it, and it's a little bit of a joke amongst the squadron commanders about who can use that phrase more in their communications with me. I just try my best to use distance means. Note what I've removed from my vernacular is the out of office. I'm never out of the office. In fact, I think I've figured it out. Anytime I'm moving away from Moody Air Force Base, as long as I'm going either north or west, I'm actually getting closer to another formation in the 93rd AGAO. And so it's that mindset that I'm always there, and it's just a matter of when am I going to run into my next airman. Because what I've realized is exposure to, and it's not just me, it's the command team, it's what is emanating from the wing, what meaning does that have for your average airman in a unit is so different than it is at a traditional Air Force wing, where let's take a squadron command, let's take my squadron command at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. I got to see my wing commander probably 4 or 5 times a week. I'd see him at least once at a staff meeting, probably a stand-up or another meeting or two. Probably saw him down at the squadron when he came down to fly. And each of those interactions was an opportunity to figure out what was on his mind, what was important to him. what does the average squadron commander get in the 93rd AGAL? Maybe sees me 4 or 5 times a year, if he or she is lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it.
Sure.
How often does a chief see it? How often does airman see it? Well, if he's at Fort Bragg or she's at Fort Bragg, maybe, or Fort Hood, maybe a few times a year. If you're at Fort Huachuca, you have seen the wing commander once since it stood up, and we got that knocked out in the fall, which I'm proud of, but it's not enough, and it's not enough that's not enough interaction. So we try to do things like this, right? Get on social media. I'm doing my best. I was my own PA for a while until Lieutenant Broadcourt showed up, and she's really helped us. But we try to tell the story as much as we can. We have a spouse outreach effort where I've tried to cut some videos and put them out there. Hey, particularly when it comes to spouses, that's one of the areas I just don't do enough for you folks. And I know it, and I've got a lot of firmly formed opinions about how valuable you are and about how we don't do enough to tell that to you, and I really wish I could share more. So I'm trying, and if you have any feedback on that, I know this guy has a wide and rabid fan following, so if you get him some feedback, I'll listen in and pitch it back to you. And then it's just this mindset of distance work. I let the squadron commanders write to me every month, unfiltered, unformatted, whatever's on their mind, brag on their airmen, tell me what their problems are, tell me what resources they need, and the whole world is carbon copied on the note, and I write back, same wide audience, and it's a chance to kind of have a virtual dialogue.
You bet.
Is it perfect? Is it the same as sitting talking face to face? It's not. I get it, but I think it's that kind of mindset. If we're going to make the AGAL work under the constraints we've been handed, which says you will be at these geographically separated locations, because that's how we, either the only way we can do our mission, or B, that's how we show dedication to the joint mission, then that's what it's going to be. And we'll continue to, we'll make the case for maybe why that's not the ideal arrangement of the wing, but until our leadership above me says go a different direction, that's what I can do.
So that's, there are a lot of people who talk about, social media, and or the different things, but I absolutely have to applaud your efforts, and we're talking about, you're doing what you can, and the thing that I've said for years, and this is kind of a blend of a couple different concepts, so I'm not taking credit, is all I can ask at the end of the day is people do what they can with what they have at that time, regardless of the circumstance, whether they want to or not.
Right.
So and that tough one ends up, that last one ends up being tough and tricky on whether you're able to pull that off. And the answer we come up with today may be wrong tomorrow, and that's fine. But having been one of the people that sees the emails that Colonel Biancardi sends to you and seeing your notes back to him, so I appreciate the engagement. So he's doing his best to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Right.
But a lot of times, what gets lost is some of our youngest generation.
Absolutely.
Our young airmen. And it isn't a bad thing. It's just I think a natural thing, a human thing, the tyranny of distance, and we have such a diverse mission. So what would you say to either our youngest airmen in our units, or any entry-level person inside any organization? What would your advice be to them to help communicate and find success?
I think it boils down to, I'm going to throw in a construct that I like to use all the time. It's the idea of balance and tension. So I think that for any issue or problem or matter, whatever you want to say, it doesn't have either a legal or a moral imperative behind it, there's going to be 2 points of view. There's going to be, and they're going to tend to take 2 different extremes. And sometimes the extremes aren't that far apart. Sometimes they're pretty polarized and pretty separated. What I would ask of any airman who has an issue, who doesn't think it's being addressed, is realize I want to engage with you. I want to hear from you what that is. Now, do I have the bandwidth to do that? No, sadly. Mere mortal, and maybe not even the strongest mortal when it comes to the ability to parse a lot of communication streams coming at me. But the people that are your direct supervisor and your commanders and your shirts and your chiefs, they absolutely do, and they're willing to pass that up. So the first thing I would, before we even get onto the spectrum I'm going to talk about, is recognize that I do want to hear that. And the last thing I want to happen is that bitterness or rumors bloom as in a petri dish that's isolated away from the light and heat that the squadron, the group, and the wing can bring. And I put myself in the shoes of an airman or a young lieutenant or something. And yeah, if there's some eye rolling going on out there, I get it. I was a little skeptical myself. And the idea that the big guy or the person who's halfway up the chain, or even the chief of staff or the chief master sergeant of the Air Force wants to hear from me, that was an epiphany that hit me when I was a lieutenant colonel. Because that's when I started to realize that I need to really know what's going on. A, so I can take care of the people. B, so that I can meet them where they're falling short in their mission. And C, so that I can rate them properly. And just know who's doing what.
You bet.
So that is something you might not believe. That's something I wish I could tell my younger self. But I want you to take that away. And the second thing is I would ask you to be you. Right? That's the best leadership advice anyone has ever given me, and that I would hand out to anyone. Be yourself. Take your perspective, stake it out, and say it confidently. Don't hide it, under a bushel or in a broom closet or anything. But then try to see either the resource constraint or the other perspective, or where the group, squadron, and wing are going because of where they find themselves, and just ask some questions. Okay, why is this happening to me? And 99.99% of the time, it's not personal. That's a truth, but that is so hard, and I've fallen prey to this. So, oh man, they're doing this to us because they don't respect us, they don't like us. It's almost never a personal reason. There's toxicity out there. I acknowledge that. None of us have a perfect attitude on every day, but most of the time, there is someone who wants to know what you're thinking, and someone who can, if they can't come all the way over to your side of the spectrum to meet you because of whatever reason, they'll at least be able to give you a why. And I think you're passionate when it comes to the why.
Absolutely.
I am too. And I think that's how you lead in today's, not just today's Air Force, but today's society, right? We're flatter. We look up and we see fewer layers between us and the goal we want to achieve. It doesn't mean that we elevate ourselves above people, but
sure.
We've kind of run out of patience for this. Okay, I need to push everything up this really long hierarchy. And I'd say that's another thing about why I like the way the 93rd AGAL is structured, because right, I cannot slow down any meaningful decision without being a bottleneck. But that goes back to our earlier topic.
And so you brought up perspective, and some of the things you were saying there. So shameless plug for one of my other podcasts is I think what you're talking about is just benefit of the doubt. For the youngest person there is that what I tell people is, if you can eliminate the possibility that you made a decision specifically to piss off your wing, every other option becomes viable, right, and plausible.
Right.
But rarely, I think, do we take the time to sit back and I think disassociate ourselves from the emotion of that decision and say, okay, if he didn't make this decision to frustrate me,
yeah,
or at least say he probably had a good reason.
Yeah.
What do I know? That could probably feed into this, which I think goes back to perspective.
Yeah.
And we had a chance a little bit before the cameras were rolling to talk a little bit about perspective. What do you know, either through your background or through your education and training as a leader, that you would want anybody else to know to help them find success inside any organization that may be missing today in I guess maybe a contemporary either Air Force culture or societal culture? What have you found has been some of your strengths to find success that you would want to impart to other people?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to key in on what you talked about, societal and demographic. I think we're way too caught up on this idea of intergenerational gaps. Way too prone to say, oh, millennials are like X, Y, and Z. I don't buy into that at all. I think young people, whatever generation is defining that, older teen to young 20-something, I think they've always had an outlook. It's always shaped by contemporary culture, contemporary world events.
Sure.
But I think those folks have always been desperate to define themselves, eager to show that they're going to contribute to the society that they're in, and they've always been a little bit impatient to get out of my way and let me prove myself. So I've had a lot of success in just meeting people as human beings and assuming that that is their take on things. I know that to be true of any high achiever, and then once you get to know someone or not, you can know if they're a pretender or if they're really sincere about it. But it helps to pare away that intergenerational, I call it nonsense. And I wrote an article on it when I was a squadron commander. I said, and again, I'm back to the two perspectives, right? If you're on the younger end of the spectrum, be respectful. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Engage them in a vocabulary and a manner to which they're going to feel like you respect their viewpoint. But then I put that onus right back here on the person at the older end of the spectrum. Don't talk down to someone. Don't assume that someone is incompetent because they're young and they might not have the experience. Don't assume that they have less fire in their belly than you did when you were that age. And honestly, people learn stuff younger. They're able to learn faster on their own, and this is something that Chief Wright and General Goldfein have keyed on. And here we sit on Randolph Air Force Base, and Air Education Training Command. General Quast sure as heck gets that. He is all over that idea. Let's not hold people back to the stilted, rote learning systems that we had of our Air Force gone by. So I kind of flip the script a little bit and say, I expect more of these younger folks. I expect that they're going to surpass me. I want them to surpass me. I need them to surpass me so that we ensure the defense of our nation. That's a big one for me when it comes to dealing with people. Another one, and this is kind of a lesson that I wish my younger self could have taught my older self.
Okay.
So I'm flipping that a little bit. I wish Lieutenant Colonel Birch and even Colonel Birch sometimes had the same innocent optimism and the same willingness to do whatever it took for my Air Force and my country and the people around me that the younger version of me did. Because when I went into the Air Force Academy, I was clueless really about what the Air Force did, other than I knew that it defended the nation and I wanted to be part of it. And whereas, I think our recruiting is aimed to getting people in the door to do a glamorous job, or particularly it's weighted toward flying sometimes. I went in not expecting to be able to fly because of some, physical limitations. And really, to me, and I shouldn't say this to an Air Force audience, but it is what it is. A service academy was a service academy. I went to the Air Force Academy because their acceptance card came back before Navy and West Points did. And so that's what got me here. And my attitude was always, I'm just going to do what they need me to do. Again, if you're sitting out there going, a little bit of eye roll, fine, I get it. But it's the God's honest truth that was my attitude. And unfortunately, my attitude calcified a little bit as I went up and met with some success. And there's something that I could discourage anyone from partaking in. It's a sense of entitlement. And the best leaders of whom I've been around recognize that you're only as good as your last contribution to the people that you take care of and to the mission you support, and then to that circle of people that supports the people you take care of, i.e. the families, loved ones, etc. So if I could keep that in mind at all times, I'd be a perfect leader. Am I a perfect leader? No, I'm not. I hope none of us think we are.
So I think those are phenomenal points, and obviously I'm jotting notes as we go down there. One of the things that you had mentioned, kind of alluded to, just because if you're one of the juniors inside that hierarchy, have faith and give benefit of the doubt to the higher ups, and if you're the higher ups or senior members inside that organization, be kind, or what I call is just maintain the moral high ground.
Yeah.
Have you? I have pet peeves when it comes to moral high ground, and I've developed scar tissue because of some people who have abandoned the moral high ground when it comes to me. Have you seen person-like examples of people who are great about maintaining the moral high ground, and the people that weren't so great with that as well as you've gone through the ranks? And how would you separate and differentiate those two different types of leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, my discussion about balance and tension across a spectrum always presumes there's not a moral imperative or a legal imperative, something that we could call that. Let me share my pet peeve with you. My pet peeve is when someone's preference becomes their moral high ground. You know, I won't call out. I'll try to be very generic in my example. I've worked around some folks who equate being present, staying a long time, debriefing to ad nauseum as the moral high ground. And I get a little bit. I have a different opinion. Let me not try to take a different form of the moral high ground.
Not that they're wrong, press.
Yeah. Because if you put it on that balance and tension cycle, there's the value of people's time, the fact that we preach, hey, I need you to spend time with your family and loved ones, I need you to be well rested, I need you to take care of yourself, and then there's dedication to mission, and sometimes it takes longer than other times. But I've been exposed to people who put themselves on this side of the spectrum and then say, well, if you finish on time or early, you're not doing it right. And so I just, again, go back to try to see the other perspective, try to see where your blind spots are.
You bet.
And I always have blind spots. That's why I have a wonderful vice and great group commanders and a great chief and a whole constellation of staffers, officers, and enlisted around me that I always say, hey, tell me when the lettuce is on my teeth. Not if. That's not a question of if. It's going to be when it is. Just tell me that it's there so I can fix it. And to me, that's the most important thing, is staying open to the critique. It will keep you from even trying to seize the moral high ground. Now, where's a place where people might think I'm standing on the moral high ground unjustifiably? Here we are doing Leaders with Leaders, and we've got 2 non-alcoholic beverages in front of us, not keeping with your theme. And we talked about this before. I am sensitive right now that we're sending mixed messages to our airmen about alcohol use. And I am not morally opposed, religiously opposed. I respect those that are, and I would not try to flaunt that in front of them. But that's not where I'm coming from. I'm simply coming from the guy who reads the blotter every day. Sorry. Gets the midnight phone call. And it's tearing us up. And there's not one incident I'm thinking of, and it's not just that people are suffering catastrophically. We have made substance use. Sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's drugs, sometimes it's these energy drinks, right? So I'll take a hit there as a coping mechanism. Sure. And for whatever it is, sometimes it's the problems in our life, sometimes it's we're not getting enough sleep, sometimes it's for a great reason to these are performance enhancing in a legal and viable way. But my theme for the wing for 2019 is let's ask more of ourselves in areas where we haven't asked more of ourselves. Not necessarily staying longer at work or working harder, but some of those places where we could treat ourselves better. And that alcohol use is one of those areas for me. And I was really grateful that you were willing to engage me on that topic, hear my concerns out there, and here we are doing this podcast, and I think it's wonderful. But that, I'm worried. Well, I'm not worried. It crosses my mind that someone out in the audience could say, he's a self-righteous teetotaler or something. Not at all. Have enjoyed a drink. Where I find myself right now, though, and feel like I can be an example to the wing, and feel like I wish all of our leaders would step up a little bit and go and just talk about your experiences with it. Because if you haven't been personally impacted in a negative way, you know someone who has, and I just wish we'd be a little bit more real with each other. But it's not moralistic high ground. At least in my
fair.
in my perspective of it, right?
No, and that's fair. And probably to clarify for our viewers and listeners out there, the point behind Leaders with Leaders is I'm firm in that if you want to make a difference, you have to do things differently. And so this was one of the opportunities that I wanted. So, and again, it doesn't have to be alcohol. So one that I did previously with Chief Master Sergeant Shane Wagner, Command Chief of the 633rd Air Base Wing at Joint Base Langley, Eustis, is a recovering alcoholic.
Right.
And so he and I and good on you, Shane. Just a great conversation, and shows how as a command chief he went to rehab. Yeah. And his leadership supported him. So absolutely one of those things. And me not trying to glamorize alcohol at all, just trying to kind of put an emphasis back to some of that human connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many times, like inside the squadron heritage room bar, that we've had for all those times, is that we've kind of gone a younger generation. They're not used to interacting that way because they've been able to talk to each other and Skype each other and FaceTime each other, and they don't have to be in the same room to have a conversation. So just trying to show them that so much of my leadership theory is just good dudership. You can call it leadership. Let's just be two good dudes getting the conversation right.
Yep. No, I'm same experience. Have learned really good lessons around the heritage room slab of wood, if you will.
Sure.
And hey, there are plenty of you who can use alcohol successfully and recreationally, and it's all good. And no judgment from me there.
And in full disclosure, I probably turned the bottle when things got rough for me probably one too many times. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I've had to work with for my post-traumatic stress, and working that through my counselor and kind of going forward. So I'm kind of sympathetic as well. But kind of along those lines, you talked about time. You're giving people time back to themselves, maximizing time, do some of the work-life balance. I don't like that word. I like work-life integration, right? Because it's naturally imbalanced as far as that goes. But a minute is not a minute because they're just minutes, and then there's good quality minutes.
Yeah.
So what do you do, sir, personally, if I may ask, what do you do for something, in the words of Dr. Janelle McCauley, to put on your oxygen mask? What do you do to restore your soul?
Yeah. So let's first just admit that my exposure to Janelle McCauley was life-changing. That was just to her methodology of putting your oxygen mask on was life-changing. That was just a few weeks ago. So I was an abysmal example of how not to integrate or balance or whatever it was. And I won't go into detail about what my day-to-day life looks like. I think the average person might find it overwhelming to think about, or at least the person who's in call it a standard living situation. But over time, I've learned to just get enough rest to have enough minutes of passion in a day for what you do. And that's not even a phrase that I would have used 5 years ago. The 5 years ago me would have said, "What are you talking? That's crazy."
Right.
But you've got to hang up the pride. Is step one, because there's some of us that develop this idea that being there a long time, or always responding to that last text, email, phone call, whatever it is the red badge of courage for whether you're an invested and caring leader or not. And I think what Dr. McCauley's main point is, no, there becomes a point at which that has sapped the energy you need to be the best leader you can be and to give people the bandwidth that they deserve. So I've made more priority on sleep, on a better sleep environment. Really trying. I've always been conscious about what I eat, drink, put in my body, but I'm just admitting to myself now that my standards probably weren't high enough for the level of performance that you all need from me, not necessarily what I need from me. My good, my oxygen mask, by the way she had us define it, would be exercise. Get to the gym almost every day, no matter what. Carve time out for that. Regularly communicating with my family, both my parents, especially as they age. Try to be in touch with them every day, so I don't lose the trace of the curve. And then of course my lovely wife. I'm religious. I won't go into it. I don't want to proselytize in this forum or in the uniform, but that is a part of my oxygen. And then seeking out the people who are really gonna pin me to the wall on stuff when I get it right and get it wrong. And right now, that is my next door neighbor, Colonel John Short at the 23rd Wing, my vice, and her family. So Colonel Willis et al. The group commanders, we text incessantly. We're like, we text each other as often as my teenage nieces do that I see. We have that good a relationship, and there are that few secrets, and we're that eager to talk with each other. So that's my oxygen right now. And if there was something that was out of whack before, it was what I was eating when I was under stress and not getting enough sleep.
Sure.
And I'm always trying to fight those battles.
And I think as all of us are, to try and do that. So we'll take that into our first break.
All right.
So we'll do that. We will reset, and we'll catch you back here after break with Leaders with the Commander, 93rd Air Ground Operations Wing, Colonel Paul Birch. We'll be right back.
Awesome.
Welcome back from break here at the Cape Lead Podcast again here with Colonel Birch. And sir, we what I probably should have started with, and I did not do this, is number one, how dumb I am for how this all kind of came to be.
Right.
So obviously, for those of you not there, I sat in your wing's senior enlisted conference, your senior leader conference, not enlisted because commanders and superintendents, everybody was there, and it was so weird because, like, for me, as I'm building my leadership concept and I want to go teach and do all those things, and I talk about caring, alignment, perspective, and expectations, without you and I ever discussing it and or syncing it, like play by play, I watched all that came out. You talked to everybody about what you cared about and what we as a wing are going to care about, what you expect your leaders to care about. And then you talked about how we're going to align ourselves to meet your intent for all those things. And you talked about the sharing of perspectives. And lastly, you ended with solid expectations. Right. So as far as expectations and they apply to either you as a human being or you as a leader, how do you view expectations inside your organization?
Yeah, thanks. I love that question because I've learned so much about it so fast in this job. Boy, where to start? Let's start with an appreciation of there's levels of expectations. Tactical, operational, strategic, however you like to break things down like that. And the recognition that you can have the perfect framework for setting, establishing, debriefing to expectations. And I love yours. I reviewed all the components of your model, and I think it's phenomenal. I think, first of all, as a leader, you have to have something that's going to drive you back to setting expectations and communicating them, because an expectation not communicated is not an expectation. That's a fundamental premise of yours. But the thing that struck me in the wing job is, I come from a tactical community that's pretty good at setting tactical expectations. Where do we fall short? We fall short in talking about personal expectations and how you act around each other. That's another podcast. But then there was the operational side. And for us, that's how do we communicate to our joint partners with what our capability is, what we're going to be able to show up to the exercise or send down range or otherwise train with or move out with you on. And I found that we have been talking past each other as two services. And so probably second half of day one imperative after I started looking through the briefings and the continuity was, hey, I don't really think that we're setting expectations realistically. We're trying to, but I don't know that we were getting that real spark in the eye, head nod. I know what you mean. I know why you're saying what you're saying. I know that's all very near and dear to the center of your heart. And then strategically, which I think of the strategic wing things as how are we resourced? Do I have enough people to do the mission? No. Do we have enough money to do the mission? No. But that's every wing commander's challenge, and that's every senior leader's challenge, is to figure out how to do the mission and take care of the people and find the right balance point there in a resource-constrained environment. It's not like this is new. It wasn't perfect in the height of the 80s, in the Cold War. But to drive that back down, we weren't doing we had taken an adversarial stance with our staffs, both at the headquarters Air Force level, at ACC, our main MAGCOM, and even to some degree with the other combatant commands that we support. And so my expectation there was, hey, let's be a little bit easier to work with. Let's not make an ad hominem, let's not make a personal attack on every staff officer who can't give us what we want. Let's be a little bit more deliberative. If the number one piece of leadership advice is be yourself, 1A or a close second has got to be do your job well and don't be a jerk. And that is, it's tough to keep perspective on that. If hopefully I'm not misusing the word perspective the way you see it, but you can get so impassioned about taking care of your airmen in your unit that you can only see a failure to give what you think you need or to meet your requirement as a personal attack on you and your airmen. And probably first on your airmen, which then reflects on you. And I hate to say it, but again, 99.99% of the time, it's not that way.
You bet.
It's just a thing. It's people trying to make strategic decisions for the good of the nation's defense. But yet, that's where I saw a lot of frustration in the wing. So recognizing there's 3 different levels of expectations, and then how much time do you spend balancing each one? What was the most critical? We have challenges at every level in setting expectations. We have challenges in trying to communicate those expectations. And for each mission set, it was a little bit different. So for the base defense group and what they were doing and their continual deployment rhythm to a mission that others could do, we needed to communicate strategically that, hey, you have a capability here, you're not using it to its full capability, and in fact you're letting it atrophy if you keep sending it back to the same old theater, because this is a unit that can do new things. So I empowered the group commander to go have strategic decisions around the globe, which he's executed very well, and that unit's focus is going to change as a result. In the TACP side of our mission, it's primarily about resourcing and telling the right story to the Army, and then telling the right story to the staff about what we need. And when you can't make the ends meet, as it were, then going back and saying, here's what we're going to be able to do. Copy, here's what you're going to give us, here's what we're going to be able to do with that. And if I go any further than that, I'm going to break my airmen.
You bet.
And getting that fine-tuned is tough. And I will apologize as your wing commander to those of you for whom we haven't struck that balance, because I know it's out there. Then the Army Weather Support folks, it was really driving a dialogue with headquarters Air Force staff about what is it that you expect we're doing here, because we have a pretty clear idea of what the Army Weather Support mission is in the AGAL, and I won't talk too much about this. I'm going to be a little bit deliberately reticent about it because we really haven't driven that to closure yet. But we've got some phenomenal support from our headquarters leaders and from the 9th Air Force staff and from the ACC staff, and I'm optimistic that we're gonna get the genie back in the bottle here, and we're gonna do the mission. We're not going to scrape our airmen off on the sharp blade of under-resourcing and over-missionizing it, which is kind of where we are right now. So those are the 3 things that I continually think about at that strategic / operational level across our mission sets. And how much time can I spend communicating that to get it across? Probably until I have to go to bed every night, right? Probably until I have to find that balance and tension. So and I don't get there, but again, I've got a whole bunch of people who are helping me out.
You bet.
Do their job.
And as far as the expectations that you have of people, we talk about tactical, operational, strategic. We talk about all the things that we do to prepare our people for war, for everything that we need to do, that you need to do to organize, train, and equip, get people ready, to get them out the door, to do God's work on a global scale for the United States of America, that all these great teammates that you and I have. But what we never teach people is really how to interact with their spouse and their families.
Yeah.
So we just kind of let that go and expect them to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
and I know that spousal support and reaching out to them, and as we've already discussed in the first half of this interview, what do you think that we can do better? What would you like people to know about interacting with spouses and or families?
Yes. Well, since you said the word spouse, it's time for me to say thank you. It's just every time I get overcome with emotion when I think about what our spouses pour into our units, either directly, indirectly, or in ways you don't even know, by the way you make your service member able to go through their day, their month, their deployment, whatever it is. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And again, like I said in the first half, I wish I could do more to engage. But I've thought in some depth about what would I want a spouse to hear. Because I'm a military spouse. I didn't talk a lot about my wife at the beginning, but we're a dual military couple. She's transitioned through the reserves now and is on a little bit of a hiatus while she works another civilian job. But I've been a military spouse. She's been a military spouse, and there's a little bit of a double standard. Let's just go ahead and acknowledge that for the male-female side. She was expected to run coffees and attend luncheons and working groups because she was a female spouse of a male military member. Did anyone ask me to run a Christmas party for the civil engineer squadron that my wife commanded? No. So that's the first thing I want to acknowledge. There's that part of the audience. But I think if you're, let's say you're talking couples who aren't dual military, there's been a distinct demographic shift in our country, and we don't really acknowledge that as much in the Air Force when we talk about things like key spouse programs or just spouse engagement. And I just want to acknowledge it to you and say that I have been one of three kinds of spouse in my life, and sometimes in the course of 1 hour. So in my mind, there's that central demographic that the old Air Force thinks about. That's the spouse who, because they don't have employment outside the house, or their life circumstances are such that they can spend a lot of time directly supporting what the unit is doing, being there, present, showing up, being an avid supporter, and we love those folks, and they're great. And those are the folks that I see now that I'm a wing commander. But I'm cognizant of two other kinds. And the second kind, and probably given what I know about demographics, that's a spouse who is actively employed throughout the day with stuff going on, whether it's his or her own career, whether it's taking care of the family, whether it's taking care of elders, whatever you got going on. Most folks have something that's going to take up most of their time, and while they support their military member with all their heart, we're not going to see them very often, and that's the silent majority to me that I think about. And then there's a third set, and this is maybe more defined by attitude than life circumstance. There's a third set that is either not able or not interested in being a very visible part of the support system, but they see a lot of attention and thanks being lavished on this part of the spectrum. They don't see us talking a lot about this middle part, and so their support of their military member is probably as strong as anyone else, but their trust level is probably low, and maybe their bitterness level is high about the Air Force that's behaving like a 1950s anachronism, pretending that we all live and leave it to Beaver's world, and June Cleaver is going to show up at the squadron. And like I said, I've moved between all three of these mindsets sometimes in the course of the hour, and I just want to recognize that you are all valued to me. And if you're over here hanging out, trust me, the promotion system does not take into account what the spouse is here to do, but sometimes the public perspective that we put forward puts a little bit too much focus here. So I just wanted you all to hear that from a wing commander. For what it's worth, is one opinion among many, but you're all valued to me, and I know that everyone has a direct contribution to national defense for what you do for your families. And frankly, it's not just spouses. Now we're talking about distant families, we're talking about the kids, we're talking about everybody there. But I think somebody had to acknowledge that, and it plays into my expectations.
You bet.
My expectations are that you'll be a loved one of that military member who is your nexus to the Air Force, and that's it. It stops there. If you want to do something else, if you want to go above and beyond, much appreciated. It's gravy. There are folks that have the time, the opportunity, and the desire to do that, but no one's contribution, no one's value is diminished by the amount of time you have, because it's not your job. They're not paying anyone to do it.
You know, and I got caught up in that as well. You know, to where one of those, well, you know, there was a spouse who was frustrated that her husband got orders quickly. She wasn't expecting that. We're like, well, you married a military dude. What did you expect? We're like, how could you expect anything? You know, you don't know what that's like until you're in it. And you know, and if you don't know the system, and so for so many people, for the spouses out there, again, it's amazing. I think as a service member, my wife has never served. I know I do a horrible job at communicating with her. For whatever it is, for as great as I think I can be at communicating inside the confines of my organization, the minute I take off my uniform and I go home, I just stroke out and I don't share
You're in
anything.
the bubble of silence.
It's horrible. I mean, I treat my family the worst when it comes to communication, everything that the military has trained me to do.
Right.
So family, I apologize. I am part of the problem. I'm trying to be part of the solution. You know, that ends up being there. And again, it's one of those things to where I think we're trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that's good. But you know, in the words of you know, Ben Franklin, if better is possible, good is not enough. Mm-hmm. And
we don't, you know, as folks wearing the cloth of our nation, we don't take the note from the teacher home fast enough. And then sometimes we're quick to blame the chain of command for springing on us something that we've known for several months. And it's, you know, and sometimes we refract a little bit of annoyance from home as a overblown crisis back. So keep your integrity intact. Don't exaggerate either what's coming from work or what's coming from home. That's my expectation for the folks who, you know, are getting a paycheck from Uncle Sam.
As a weird kind of additive to that, I think one of the most unique things that you've said so far was your advice to simply be you.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many people, like, for all kinds of great reasons, who are just trying to find success.
Yeah.
And they're trying to fit in Air Force mold. But I don't believe there is one.
Yeah.
I think each wing commander, I think each chief or command chief has drastically different routes that they've taken to find success. So what advice would you have to help someone be them while still trying to find their way throughout an organizational hierarchy of success?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things, and they might sound cliche. The first one that comes to mind is I've never convinced someone to adopt a new attitude or a new opinion by yelling at them and saying, my way or the highway, buddy. So why not, first of all, just acknowledge that everyone brings a fresh set of eyes to a problem, and that the background and the family and the values that they have, you know, we're a melting pot of a country for a reason. We're a melting pot of a military for the same good reasons. So I'm, you know, yeah, there's no standard career path. There's no standard lifestyle that you have to join the military to be successful. But what I will tell you is what my football coach told me in high school is don't ever play half speed because you're going to get hurt. So go in there, you know, let your attitude hang out a little bit, and if it's too rough, or if you bring something that's a little bit ugly to the equation, find a friend or find a leader and go, hey, talk to me about this if I get out of hand, and have them sharpen you up in a way that you're ready to hear, so that you're not getting it from someone who's yelling at you and is going to break it. So if you can keep those two things in mind, I think you're well on your way to success. And you know, again, that goes back to that. It's both sides of the equation. It's the sender and the receiver. It's treating folks that might be lower in rank or lower in experience with respect, and then it's those folks looking up and recognizing there is some valuable experience above me, even if they're not perfect and they don't all have the answers. And that brings probably the third most useful leadership thing I learned is when I was really young, I wanted all my senior leaders to be perfect, and I wanted to look at, you know, a colonel or a general that I could emulate in every way. Well, guess what? There's not anyone out there like that. there are some that come close for me, but I've never met one that's exactly perfect. And the time that it took to transition from thinking that everyone was an ideal leader to recognizing that we're all human beings, that was a tough time in my career. That was that late captain to late major stage in my career, and I was disillusioned wherever I looked because I was looking for perfection. Well, once I started to look at myself and recognize that I wasn't a role model in every area, it became a lot easier to look at each person and go, wow, he or she has something that they can offer to me, and I want to pick up on that, and I'm not going to judge them for the what I see are shortcomings in their life, because I probably have something that's equal or greater to that, and it doesn't make a hill of beans difference about the good thing they did.
You know, and I think it's one of those, like we kind of joked at the very beginning, is that, you know, you're leading a team full of human beings.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I want you as my wing commander, I want you to understand that I'm human. I'm human. I'm gonna. One of the squadron commanders I work with at McGuire had a phenomenal quote. Says, you know, if it's humanly possible, humans will do it.
Right.
You know, so that's both good and bad examples to that.
Yeah.
But you know, I need to allow that my wing commander is human as well. You know, not every swing is going to be a home run, but we need to get that conversation going, right? Because it's one of those, like we were talking about, is if you have a blind spot, you are never going to find it.
Right.
Because it's your blind spot.
By definition.
It wouldn't be a blind spot. And for whatever reason, I don't think we understand this concept good enough, well enough, right? So we talk about blind spots, we talk about Jerry's window, but we never talk about, like, you have to tell me what my blind spot is. I'm not ever going to figure it out for myself.
And I love listening to that, because on your show, because that helped me, just helped remind me, I've got to have an exo-conscious. I've got to. So it's not because I'm necessarily prone to failings that others. Well, I am. We're all prone to failings that others aren't. But yeah, you just don't see it sometimes, and there's always got to be that 1, 2, 3. I think it should be a small circle of folks, right? If you're opening yourself to a struggle session with everybody that walks around you, your self-esteem might take more of a hit than it needs to, but you've got to have that small coterie of people who are willing to approach you and that you want to hear from.
Sure. You know, and that kind of feeds right into my next point of I'm a huge John C. Maxwell follower. Mm-hmm. So 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and one of his laws is the law of the inner circle.
Yeah, okay.
So as far as these people that can point out your blind spot, like without getting into names or job titles or perhaps anything, what do you think are some of the strengths of your personal inner circle that helps either make you A, a better human being, or B, a better leader?
Yeah. Well, their character is impeccable. Always find people who you really admire and say, boy, I wish I was that good. And it can be in the skill sets they have, but the most important thing is their integrity and character. Just, we all know someone who would never do the wrong thing, and that's an unrealistic ideal. But compared to you, we all know somebody who would, and sometimes they might not be our favorite person in the world. Let's be real about that. We might find their approach to life just a little bit grating sometimes. So, not that any of my inner circle grates on me now, but when I was younger they did. And so you have to set boundaries. And so I have a inner circle who knows how I take feedback. And one of the things is, you can tell me 1 or 2 things. And my wife and I used to joke, she's a great swimmer, I'm a terrible swimmer. And I said, I want you to take me in the pool and, put me through the paces. And she's great. She's a great swimming coach. She's taught little kids how to swim. And she, when she was on her 10th tip of the night, I was like, okay, hon, you know what? I'm getting old. I was in my early 20s, so it's funny to think about. I can really only absorb, 1 or 2 things. And it all came down to pride. And I like to think now I'm probably back to being able to absorb more than that, because I don't take it as a personal insult. But you have to know, and the person with whom you're working has to know how you receive information, how fast you can receive information, and when in the right way to present it so that they don't go over the ego trip. Let's take weightlifting, right? Because most of our formations and most of our folks will do that at some point during their day. There are some of us who benefit from what I would say a positive cheerleader kind of bent, right? And I'd say most do.
Sure.
Come on, you got this.
Yeah,
Give me 10. Yeah, push through this last one. there's a slightly smaller set of people who are motivated when someone approaches them from that hostile or that cross-examining lawyer stance. You're just going to quit on this one, just like you did in the last one. Be really careful with that kind of motivation, right? That doesn't work in my family, that kind of thing. Although people have had success in calling me out at the right time, but that's somebody you've got to have a lot of trust in. You don't do that on the first lifting session. That happens after you've walked a while down the path together.
So getting to know your people, understanding their personality, getting the conversation right.
Exactly.
You know, as far as how all that goes. You know, you said do your job well and don't be a jerk. And you know, this goes to good dudership as far as how I see it. And again, I'm not trying to offend anybody by the words here. Is that the two best compliments I can give is he's a good dude or she's an awesome chick.
Right.
You know, and again, not trying to be offensive, but in a common American vernacular.
Right.
You know, that is so. What are some of those traits that you would see in people? So we talked about outstanding character as far as your inner circle, but what would at face value, just a quick maybe 2 or 3 different things that would help define what would make someone a good dude or an awesome chick?
Yeah, and I'm struggling to spit them out because I don't want to give one proprietary importance over another until I've thought it through a little bit.
So your 3 number ones.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
so there we go.
No, it's somebody that it's always got to come back to integrity, right? The fact that that's our lead core value means something. So it's got to be someone who will be truthful at the end of the day. A good dude or dudette or chick is not someone who's going to lie to you, even when you want them to. And that goes to trust. And you know, let's just be honest. I can form an impression of you in a quick engagement, much like the one we're undertaking today. But I can't know you until we've been tested a time or two. And there are some folks, and I think the military is good at teaching you this. There are some folks who will quickly prove their mettle in a test. And if we're talking about the importance of inner circle, and we're talking about calling somebody out when they need to be called out, the folks that are quick to do that, unfortunately, a majority of the audience is gonna turn on. And then you might even see those folks leave the military early because they aren't recognized for the leadership potential they have, because they're not a good dude in the more common use of the term, which is someone who's always going to just go along to get along.
The proverbial yes
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, or yes man, or just even a fair weather friend. A fair weather friend.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at this on a peer-to-peer relationship, but you're right. It applies going up the. So that's the most important thing. I talked a little before. Someone who gets you and knows how you receive information, but they've got to be brave, because everything we're talking about is personally brave. Really, the first time I ever challenged someone in the squadrons I grew up in, that wasn't related to their flying. Hey, fighter pilots are great about telling each other, you stank up place doing this, this, and this. And we eat it up and debrief, and we're like, thank you, we write it down, we go home and study it, and we try to do it better the next time. Just like any good tactician does in any good unit across the military. Where we're awful is sitting someone down and going, hey, the way you interact with people is a liability, either because they don't see your potential, you are offending them and shutting them out, or you're just not an effective communicator. And the first time I had a conversation like that with someone, it was not fun for me. I don't think anyone loves being disciplined in the moment. I just don't think that's. There's not too many people that are wired that way. Some will act like it, but they really don't mean it. But it went well, and I delivered the news as gently as I could. Don't be a jerk.
Sure.
Right. And really, he was a good dude. He was someone who was going to be willing to take feedback and had some maturity and had a good perspective. And 5 years later, when he got in touch with me, and I won't be too specific because it identify the individual, but he said, I've got this great, prestigious job. My career is not only on a good place, but it's really taken off. He's like, I can trace it all back to that one time when you told me X about my personality and how people saw me.
Nice.
And that was an epiphany for me because it said, okay, you need to be braver at confronting people where you're there. And then, of course, as you move up in the ranks, you get fewer and fewer opportunities to work with someone at that meaningful level, which is the bittersweet part of leadership, right?
So, kind of on that, and to end, hopefully, what is the first of many installments of leaders with you, sir, is that kind of along those lines, and going back to expectations. You have all your commanders out there, I'd be willing to bet, would love to have your job in the future. And all of your enlisted people would love to take Chief Edwards' job as your command chief.
As they should.
What advice do you have for the officers, the enlisted, to help them find success, either A, in your wing, or B, inside the Air Force?
Yeah. Do you as aggressively as you can. Be yourself, live in your personality. Be honest with yourself about whether you're fully enthusiastic about the mission. But don't be shy about making changes in your environment or raising concerns if you feel like something is preventing you from fully blooming as a leader or a follower or just being the tactician who's jobbing it out there every day. And I could tell a story about each one of those elements, but I know you're trying to wrap it out. But I'll go back to my football coach's cliche. Don't play half speed because you will get hurt. You've got to go. You've got to go with the intensity that only your personality can provide in your context. And unless you do that, you're not going to get everything out of yourself. And we all have different levels of self-awareness. You may perceive that you going full bore in your personality is not being well received. Seek out some feedback. The Air Force loves that fight for feedback line. So go fight for that and say, hey, I'm trying to do the thing here. You don't seem to appreciate it, and you might find yourself with an honest conversation that's really valuable to you, or you might go, the values of the leaders above me they deviate from mine. And this is the conversation that I have with almost every mid-level person is your personal values can deviate from the organizational values or where you see the immediate leadership going, and that's okay.
Yes.
Right? Because if I completely define who you are by what the Air Force means to you, you're probably a robot. Or you're the chief of staff. Sorry, General Goldfeet, I love you. That there comes a point when the two values diverge, and that's okay because your priorities have to at some point separate from the Air Force.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with, at a bare minimum, communicating that to you. If I took off my command chief star because it wasn't worth it, the cost to my family anymore.
There you go.
And so that's it. It's not that it's bad. I don't hate where the Air Force is going or what they were trying to give me a great job. And I would have loved to have done that job, but I really want to be a dad.
Yeah.
And I really want to be home.
But yeah, and here you are contributing to the fortification of all our leadership skills. So you haven't really taken the command chief star off.
Sure.
In intent.
Yeah, so I intend to wear that for the rest of my life. And as we wrap up here, so as we go through, we started talking about perspective, tyranny of distance, and then we just talked about balance and tension. Like I really, really like that. And to me it's the same water that softens the potato hardens the egg.
Yep.
It's not necessarily the environment, it's how you react to it.
Yeah.
But also your understanding of the environment around you,
yep.
And whether you have that balance and tension. You want to hear from people because you care. You want them to be themselves.
Do.
You want to hear different perspectives and talks. You understand generational gaps, but it's no different than when we were young. I remember being a young airman, they called me Pepsi generation when we didn't have all the cute names for it.
Yeah.
And that's it. So it's really, and again, I agree with you completely that it's really no different. And I didn't have to do all that old school stuff because we've advanced. I don't have to do that stuff anymore. We talk about being patient. We talk about human beings maintaining the moral high ground. Optimism, like such a great thing. And you've heard, if you're that person who's always the devil's advocate, you're no longer a devil's advocate. You are in fact an asshole. Because
fair.
Because at some point, like I want positivity too. Because I think life's hard enough. Military life's even harder, and war is damn near unsurvivable.
Right.
If you're always
need hope.
We absolutely need hope. We need someone there just doing the optimism and positivity. No entitlement. We talked about how we spend our time, how we put on our oxygen mask. Thanks, Dr. McCauley. We talk about your expectations of senior leaders. We talk about your understanding and the thanks of the spouses who unwittingly sacrifice so much. So for everything that you do, thank you so much. Do your job. Don't be a jerk. You have a solid inner circle. Seek out feedback. Have impeccable character. You said it. Be tested. Be brave. And then don't play half speed.
You got it.
This is amazing. Sir, I appreciate your time, your willingness to be on the podcast. I hope we get to do this in the future. And this has been a true honor for me. Thank you so much, sir.
Ditto. Thanks a lot, Chachi.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll catch you back here next time on the Cape Lead Revolution with another yet edition of Leaders with Leaders. And this is Chachi reminding you to always educate, anticipate, and dominate. We'll see you again soon.